Good evening, everybody. This is Hayden Institute of Education. Can't say Institute tonight. Don't know why. Hayden Institute of Education. I'm Dwayne. This is the Diploma of Alcohol and Other Drugs. And tonight we've got the second session of CHCMHS007, Work Effectively in Trauma-Informed Care. New module next week, obviously. And like I said, this is a second session too. We'll just kick off, as usual, with the acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayden Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. So we thank them for that, obviously, and just look at the housekeeping. Just the expectations with the class. Obviously, cameras on, so that we're all engaging together. Microphones off, so there's no feedback coming through the microphone, the speakers, or any sharp noises. Breaks 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock, where we can manage it. When there's been going to be a few hours of study, then it's nice to break it up. Obviously, class participation, just once there's a few people in the class, it's difficult to get people interacting logistically easily. So using the reactions button underneath the video screen is good to stick your hand up, and then that means that I can see you straight away. Respectful relationships, just we're all in this together, we're all studying together in the end, and we're all learning something all the time. So just be respectful of each other, their opinions and their beliefs, values. No smoking, vaping, or obviously drinking alcohol on camera. It's just like a tape class or a staff meeting, or it wouldn't be happening there. So we're not wanting it here. As also, it could be a trigger for people. Nobody wants to start studying and then see somebody using something that they're wanting to give up. Equally, a lot of the topic could be triggering. So that's sometimes difficult enough with the study modules and the study matter that's potentially triggering or confronting. Just look after yourself and be kind to yourself with looking after each other and looking after other people and looking after people at work and family and friends. It's important to be kind to yourself. So you've got to make time to take time out and put back into yourself every week as regularly as you can, because sometimes it doesn't even happen every week or every 2 weeks. Just by the end of the session, this is part of it, looking at trauma barriers, anger management, crisis management, detrimental practices, self-care, case studies. That's part of what we're doing. There's other bits that I need to add on. So just the way the modules are structured, the way that we have to jump around sometimes. I'll show you this, which we see all the time. Training websites. Pull the other screen, the other one. Yeah, thank you. So this is the unit that we're doing, CHCMHS007, Work Effectively in Trauma-Informed Care. So the government wants us to study certain things. Sometimes what the government wants us to study to gain the qualification isn't as important in the industry. And unfortunately, sometimes the industry wants us to study things that are really, really important in the industry, in the workplace, but the government's sometimes got meh. So it's trying to match both of them up. And at Hader, we're trying to obviously put assessments together that deal with both. Usually, we've done it well, and the learning guide can compensate for both and look at industry expectations and the government, what they require, just so that they both fit together. In that, sometimes like some of the learning material in the slides, sometimes it's what the government wanted, and sometimes it's going to be more applicable from like an industry standpoint. So when we're looking at the assessments, which is what I wanted to do first tonight, it means that I'm bringing out the most important stuff that we need straight away. Whatever's in the slides might not be as important. So it's almost like adverts tonight. So that's the learning guide. That's the government website. Obviously, Discord. If you haven't heard about this, if you're new or just past couple of weeks, Discord is trying to reduce the waiting list and trying to give you a tool where you can logistically book role plays together. So it still is. I was going to say it used to be a gaming, console gaming, like messaging app, and that's still what it is. But Hader's managed to get a channel on here, and you need to have your own account. So you register your own email address, and then you use the invite from the next to the Accelerate login. It's to help set up role plays when you've only got one person and you need another one or two for one of the role plays, and it's really difficult logistically. Then this is a perfect place to try and get it set up. So, like I said, you need to register your own email address, so you have your own account, and then you accept the invite. You can't go on here and look for Hader. You have to accept the invite from next to the Accelerate login on the portal. And once you've accepted the invite, then it takes you to the terms and conditions called rules of engagement. But it's basically terms and conditions like no profanity, be respectful to people, don't share answers to any of the quizzes online. That's not what it's for. So once you read all that and you agree with it, then you click on the thumbs up icon to say you agree. And then as soon as you agree, then it takes you to all of the channels there. And there's people already here. We've got, obviously, if you're doing AOD, then we've also got youth work, community services, mental health, early childhood and individual support. And there's people in all of these that are always looking for role play clients to work with, whether that's a mental health client, that's maybe somebody in community services, so it's an aged care client potentially. So the whole idea is that you can find somebody on here to be your client in a role play, or you can be a client because you've got half an hour spare sometime in the week and you're happy to jump in and do somebody else's role play. And it's good because it's nice to have somebody at home that you might have, like a partner, parent, child, sibling that can help out. But with their best intentions, sometimes having somebody that's a bit camera shy or more focused on whether they're getting the words right, that doesn't set you up for a win with a role play. And when it's somebody from Hader who knows exactly the type of thing that you're looking for, they can set you up for asking the right questions at the right time because they know what you're looking for. I think it's a brilliant idea to do this. So that's Discord. And Is that it? I think so. So before I start on the slides, I can't remember whether we looked at the assessments last week. That's not the point. Point is that that I've lost them. No, I haven't. So I wanted to look. There's 3 assessments. One's a role play, one's question and answers as usual. The first one, the first assessment that I wanted to look at, sorry, is number 2, because it builds into the others, like this. So this is the second one, and yes, one's a reflection. That's right. In the AOD field, it's important for workers to understand the different relapse prevention strategies and recommend the most suitable strategies to fit their clients' needs. So this is straight away. Number 2 is kicking off with relapse prevention strategies. It's talking about Marlet's relapse prevention and Gorski's. Where's Gorski? There. Gorski's relapse prevention plan. So 2 different types of relapse prevention plan. Now, the questions right at the beginning also kick off with that. So going down the questions, you're looking at factors that influence substance abuse, triggers for relapse, ethical and legal considerations for relapse prevention, 2 main models of relapse prevention. Well, I've already mentioned them. And more relapse prevention stuff. There's heaps down there about the questions. If you finish the questions, that's fine. But looking at this, obviously you're going to be wanting to bring some of this into the role play because it's telling you to. So the what I wanted to look at was comparison before we start on the slides, the comparison of the 2 models. So this is Marlet and Gordon, relapse prevention tool. This is when we've looked at relapse prevention models and plans in other modules, we're generally looking at both. There's a relapse prevention document in First Access, and it's a bit of a mixture between these 2. Awesome. All right, let's stop here. Right, Russia. What have you got?
I have open CHCMHS007, work effectively in trauma-informed care.
That's great. Okay, so this is the module we're looking at. MHS007, work effectively in trauma-informed care. It's wanting you to look and think agency-wide, not client-specific, agency-wide. The only specificity is interpersonal violence, and even that's not specific person. That's like group of client, an area of type of client. So that's the way the module's wanting to look. And obviously, when you are working in your assessments, then it'll be reflected in there. So I'll jump into the slides. So experiencing trauma is characterized by feelings of loss of power and control. That was kind of almost the Google definition. So it's still pretty accurate. Like somebody's feeling overwhelmed, overpowered by this crisis, this trauma, feelings of loss of power and control, intense fear, and maybe anxiety, maybe many types of mental health illness, and consequent loss of trust in other people. So because of the potential of the trauma coming from somebody that was close to them, then obviously the trust is going to go down. So we're looking at trauma-informed care. What happened to you? Tell me your story. I'm listening, rather than why are you like that? This might be the way family members respond to each other. Why do you do that? Why are you acting like that? Why did you say that? What makes you respond like that? And that's not the way we want to act. Because then those type of phrases come from a certain way that people work from. And why are you acting like that is almost a solution focused type thing. It's not somebody that's got empathy and they're trying to work with somebody. It's trying to, okay, well, why did you say that? What do you do that for? Let's fix it. And then you don't need to act like that anymore. So what it is and isn't, what it is, it's unconditional positive regard with empathy. That's what I was on about. Going the extra mile for the client. Yes, it is, but just in your boundaries. It's going the extra mile in your scope of practice, in your boundaries, saying this is how far I can take it. If you keep going the extra mile all the time, you'll get lost, I guess. You'll end up having to spend a lot of time with the supervisor in supervision. Therapies for moving people out of stress. There's loads of different ways. You'll find once you've looked and studied plenty of therapies and different styles and different ways of working, then you'll find you don't have to go the extra mile. You can show the empathy, you can show the sincerity because you've got it right. You know what you're doing. Just plug my laptop in. Battery's dying. So it's looking at different therapy styles, it's coping mechanisms, helping somebody understand coping mechanism for the day-to-day life, day-to-day issues, really. Understanding the client's negative behaviors and defense mechanisms. And that is what a lot of people might be focusing on. So a family member, a partner, a parent would be just focusing on the coping mechanism because they're the obvious things. The short temper, or even shorter than that, the instinctive reaction becomes a defense mechanism. And that's the biggest evidence. So that's what people would focus on rather than why is there a response like that? It's let's just focus on the negative emotion that's come out. Hope that they can get better. Knowledge is power. The client is the expert. That's the key, obviously. We're not wanting to move them on faster than they can go. We're not wanting to suggest anything that's out of their ability. So we want to make sure that that even in trauma care, it's still the stages of contemplation. And if somebody is not in the contemplative stage to want to move to get support, we can't force them. We can't push them hard. All we can do is just work with them until they're ready to move and take that step further. So what it's not judgment. It's not giving up on people. It's not being stuck in stress and constant anxiety. For us, sometimes the client can feel that's what it feels like they're in. And it's not punishment for mistakes or coping mechanisms. If people need to vent, if people need to offload emotion, then that can happen. That's going to have to be a place where people need to do that. And it's not lack of hope. And the expert is not us, obviously. We're professionals in therapies and AOD and legislation. We're not the expert and we're not the professional of their life. So just one video first. I think this is a long one. It's a TED Talk. So it's the power of everyday heroes. As usual, I'll chuck a link in the chat. If you've not tried it before, speed it up. You don't have to, but try it to 1.25. If it's more than 3 or 4 minutes long, it's a great idea to speed it up to 1.25, and you barely notice the difference. So obviously, she's the lady on the TED Talk was she's a comedian, TV celebrity in the UK, and she's gone through a lot of trauma, like horrible amount of trauma that nobody should, and that is the type of person that we're working with. I guess we would hope that anybody that we work with could potentially move on and have like an amazingly fulfilled life. And when in AOD, we talk about like a life of recovery after addiction. But with trauma and crisis in somebody's life, talking about the same type of recovery and life after that. If you've had any experience of either, sometimes it feels difficult to think that there will be a life after the trauma. But with somebody's own personal story like that, it gives a tiny glimpse of that person that we're working with every day. It doesn't feel like there can be any immediate future or potential for positive life, but there is definitely potential there. So I'll just jump back onto the slides. And when we've looked at the principles of trauma-informed care, obviously looking at understanding trauma and its effects, safety, and it's not just when we see safety on an assessment or in a question, it's quite often talking about physical safety, but we've got to remember that most often we're talking about emotional safety, and then bring in the physical safety wherever we can and think, okay, how safe is this person physically? Who is going to be the high risk factor to this person? Is it going to be a family member? Is it going to be themselves? So what are the risk factors around them and who are the big threats? But more importantly than that, it's the emotional safety about when we're working with somebody that's undergone some trauma, then if they don't feel safe, if they don't trust, they don't feel like that we're empathizing with them, we're not going to be able to help them. So the most important thing that we can do without even knowing any of the therapies, we've got to most importantly figure out how to build the trust, build the safety for the person, and build the rapport so that they feel safe enough to open up and just trust us with any small piece of information. We're not wanting to make them feel safe so that they can confess everything to us. That's not the goal. The goal is to just give them a place where they can feel safe enough to just feel comfortable to talk about the footy or their family or grandparents dying or flip between any of them at just a moment's notice. So we have to figure out how to build that, understand the trauma, build the safety, build the trust, giving them the choice. When in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of trauma, however long the trauma's lasted, years, decades, they feel out of control, they feel overwhelmed. And part of our job is to help somebody realize where they can control. Because when somebody's in trauma, when they're in crisis, there's certain things that they try to control, obviously, whether that's addiction, whether that's food, whether that's body image, whether that's relationships. And they're trying to control OCD. They're trying to control as many things as they can because of the things that control them and made them feel out of control. So trying to give them choice, control, empowerment, knowledge of where they can control their own lives and control their own recovery and help is powerful. So we're collaborating with them, we're empowering them, we're respecting the diversity, whatever, they're completely different to us quite often, but we can still provide a safe space for them. And looking at different recovery models, that's going to help them even more. So services, key services. Australian Employment Training Solution tries to not stereotype, but trying to like personality profile and trying to narrow down with the client. Okay, what strengths have you got? Have you done a personality profile before? Are you really good at communicating with people? Are you studious? Do you like reading? Do you like studying? Do you like researching facts? What is it that you can do, and how can we build on that? And a lot of people don't know. Sometimes we don't know ourselves, so we have to sometimes go out and maybe do a character strength profile or a personality profile. The DISC one is one of the most common ones. Like people do the DISC personality profile all over the world. Worth doing if you haven't done it. And trying to narrow down people's skills, personal achievements, the positive things in their story. That's what we're looking for. Yes, Marty.
Is when it comes to personality profiles, are you talking like the Myers-Briggs type of thing as well?
Yeah. That's
probably
Myers-Briggs
what most people are probably aware of that one because everybody's done
definitely,
it, I think.
Yeah. And when we say that would be one of the most common ones, yeah. If you've done a personality profile, then you've probably done the Myers-Briggs one. But if you haven't done a personality profile, it's like it's hard to explain to somebody what they are, what they're for, and what you can get out of them. And they really
the Simpsons version of Myers-Briggs is awesome because it's really accurate. That. Oh, it's awesome. It puts a comedic but it's so accurate as well. It's because it identifies you with a Simpsons character. Yeah.
Oh, maybe I have seen that somewhere.
And I quite happily admit I'm Krusty the Clown.
We'll find it. We will definitely find it tonight, Russia. That's Marty's project for break, I think. Finding a link. Ian TJ, what's that, Ian? Is that the link?
It's Myers. That's it. That's his Myers-Briggs.
That's my Myers-Briggs.
I don't know what it
Yeah.
means, but I know.
Sorry. Okay. I thought you were giving us the link for the Simpsons one.
No, it's my, yeah, it's my my Myers-Briggs.
I'm
A
looking
very
for
rare
it now.
It's a
one.
very big eye.
Hi for Ian.
Not
Okay.
necessarily.
Safety. First of all, emotional safety. Like I said, kindness and compassion. There was, I don't know whether it was you I was talking to, but there was, I think it was in crisis intervention. The psychologist that used to work in the rehab told me about the therapeutic window, and he said that when a client's gone through a lot of trauma, the idea is to make them feel safe enough that they can imagine the room that they're in as an emotional safe place. So you build in wherever you sat with them, wherever you're talking to them, you're trying to help them imagine that they're in a safe room right now when they're talking to you, and that this room is so safe that looking out of the window is the trauma that they've dealt with, that they've been through, that they've experienced. And he said that the idea is that you can sit this person could be sat anywhere in this room, even right up close to the window where they can see the horror going on outside. And this psychologist is saying that you could potentially take somebody to sit on the window ledge and look right out of the window, knowing that they can experience it outside of the room, but they know that they're safe in the room, so they can deal with what's going out. They can deal with what's going on just outside the window. And it's not about, like I said earlier, it's not about trying to make somebody feel safe so that they open up and tell us all of the horror that they've been through. It's just about making them feel safe in that room and try and build that room with anybody that we've got to work with, so that they can tell us exactly what they need to tell us, because most of the time we're not going to be dealing with the heaviest stuff that they can possibly bring up. When we're an AOD worker, we're not focusing primarily on mental health conditions, on disorders, on the severe trauma that somebody's gone through. But we need to make sure that they are safe enough that if anything is mentioned, we're not going to re-traumatize them, it's a delicate balance, but that's got to be the key. If we mention something to them and we're talking about something to them, we want them to be able to talk about it honestly without being re-traumatized. If we re-traumatize somebody, then they've dragged something up and they didn't feel safe about talking about it. And we would rather let them keep it under wraps. I think we talked about this bit before, because me and Justin mentioned that some staff don't want to deal with it, don't want to approach the subject. And even the psychologist or whoever's working with them for like serious issues, it's better to keep it under wraps than bring it out and re-traumatize somebody. And a psychologist will say, if they're not ready to open up to them, then let's not dig into it at all. Because until they're ready and they feel safe enough to open up, then we're just going to leave that and we're going to deal with symptoms and surface issues and AOD and mental health conditions until somebody's really ready to dig into it. So emotional safety is first, then physical safety, assess risks from immediate to long term, privacy and confidentiality, obviously, builds trust. We can underestimate how much that does as well. Like we're always talking about privacy and confidentiality and making sure it's mentioned in at the beginning of the session with the client, because we don't want to do anything that's illegal, and if we don't want to take anybody's details and pass them on, and we're not going to break the law. But mentioning the privacy and confidentiality that we're bound by, even though we're going to tell them that if anything comes up, we will have to pass something on to somebody appropriate. Even when we're telling them that, they can still feel safe and put trust in what we're doing, rather than jump into the other conclusion and thinking, well, I don't feel safe with you if you're going to tell somebody exactly what I'm going to tell you. We can still make them feel safe. So cultural competency, where the person does not feel any assault, challenge, or denial of their identity, where the person feels heard and understood for who they are. And cultural safety, that module, the core module about Aboriginal and Indigenous and Torres Strait Islanders, that we're trying to provide cultural safety for them. It's meaning that I'm a different culture to you, a completely different culture to you, but you can still know that your culture is safe with me. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to look down on you for your culture, even though I'm completely different. So we don't have to be the same for somebody to be able to trust us. That's leading into standard 4 in the mental health practice standards, requiring practitioners to have an understanding of the impact of colonisation on Indigenous peoples and the resulting grief, loss and trauma of Indigenous clients. So obviously that's mentioning generational trauma, that's mentioning whether that's biological generational trauma or that's certain mental health conditions that might be passed on through family. It's certain things that are still happening now because of the way culture is set up, whether that's our government that we share that is still not dealing with things the way that we would all like them to be done, and how that affects our Indigenous clients. So mentioned re-traumatization before. So if somebody's gone through trauma already, whether that's, some psychologists talk about big T trauma and little T trauma, whichever kind of trauma it is, if it's compounded or if somebody's gone through it once, to re-traumatize somebody means that they've just gone through the same trauma all over again. That's not what we wanted to do. So triggers might include a situation, environments and events like returning war veterans that are sat in a seemingly calm, peaceful place, and they hear a car backfiring outside, and that sets something off. And when I say that sets something off, yes, it could set off mental or emotional problems, whether that's anxiety or mental health stress, but it quite often goes straight into physical sensations. So not just emotions, but feelings in the body. So a simple noise or a sensation, a smell, a sound, a sight can take somebody back years instantly and set off trauma again in somebody's body because of a sound that was exactly the same as they heard, or a smell that was exactly the same as what happened many, many years ago. Yes, it's basically a trigger. That's right, Nepal. And when we mix that with AOD, the amount of people that haven't used in years, like whether it's alcohol, and people have been sober for years and years and years. They haven't had a drink, and they'll confess that they walk to the other side of a pub because if they smell that beer that they used to drink, or they smell that alcohol, that specific one, they know that it's just like they've just finished one a minute ago. And they're going back like years. And it's weird how it works with anything. Tobacco is exactly the same. I know people that they gave up cigarettes 10, 15 years ago. But if it's the right tobacco, that smell has stuck in the brain. And it's amazing how the brain can go back 15 years instantly and say, I want one now. It's remarkable, which is the power of them sensations that have been held onto by the brain. It's that can often be how we can re-traumatize somebody. So giving clients choices, even to, this is what I'd like to talk about today. Do you mind if we talk about this? I'd like to, and it's quite often a good idea if we're going to discuss something with somebody, rather than talking to them about it and leading straight into it, maybe a worksheet, so that rather than us saying that we want to deal with some mental health condition and then it's gone into the brain and they're starting to think about it, if they see on paper that this is what we want to talk about, it's still outside of them and it's not necessarily something that they're wanting to go into right now, but then they can make a choice about what's on the paper rather than something that's going on in their head. So keeping it outside of them is helpful to start with. Giving clients choices and information about the service enables empowerment and a sense of control. So even though they know that they have to deal with certain AOD issues, or they have to deal with certain mental health conditions, or whatever it is, giving them the choice of when they do it is key to moving forward. I'm going to leave it there because it is break time. I will look at the assessments straight after break. I know that we've looked at them before, the proper ones. I remember like last week. We'll do it after break. So 10 minutes. All right, assessments. We looked at the questions, haven't we? I remember that there was 22. Have we looked at them in class, or have I looked at these on my own?
I think I bailed last week because I was finding it a bit difficult being with the subject matter brain, so I can't answer.
That's all right. Anyway, so they're the questions. Maybe we'll get to them later. Okay, so we will. So we've got Belinda and Farida. The role play, 2 role plays. 10 minutes, is it? That's what I've looked for first. Oh, this is the case study. Sorry, it's not the role play. The role play, 15 minutes. And 15 minutes and 15 minutes. Isaac, Farida, and Belinda. So there's 3 role plays, 15 minutes each. And then you got the reflection at the end. All right, let's jump into the questions. Obviously, using the learning guide where you can. Question 1 is usually up near the beginning. 23 is going to be somewhere down near the end because it tries to cover it all, the whole breadth. So define the term trauma and complex trauma. So what is trauma? Right at the beginning. Identify if anybody needs like to focus on any of the questions, just shout. Identify the prevalence of trauma in the general population and discuss whether it's higher. It's almost statistical. I think it's pretty straightforward. Explain how trauma affects person development, impacts, dynamics of interpersonal violence in the home. So if I usually use Control F to bring up the search bar, and then we've got eight citations. It's the only word I could think of, sorry, of interpersonal violence. First one at the beginning, and then dynamics of interpersonal violence. Excuse me. So plenty of information there for that one. Discuss the 4 types of strategies individuals might use to cope and manage the impact of trauma. Discuss the potential causes and risks of re-traumatization when accessing or receiving services. How do you minimize re-traumatization? That's a great question. Which of the following statements is correct as to how gender might inform the application of trauma-informed care? Got a video on it later. If we don't get to see it, then you can, I'll give you the link. Sexual orientation and gender. That's not what it's meaning, it's how trauma is gendered. Is it? Which of the following statements is correct as to how gender might? All right, yeah, okay. Gender can impact the type of trauma likely, or gender doesn't impact. Oh, it's pretty straightforward. I was reading too much into that. Describe 3 common beliefs and attitudes towards people who experience interpersonal violence and how these impact their access to services. Interpersonal violence, or interpersonal trauma and self-harm. Examples of how somebody's being impacted by re-traumatization, re-victimization, or flashbacks. What triggers and flashbacks are. Most of up to now, it's all really easy to find. During service delivery, a person who has experienced trauma may be impacted by specific situations. For each of the following, explain how it can impact the client and lead to re-traumatization. Seclusion. Obviously, these types of things they're used in mental health units, yeah, but they're structurally used in mental health units. But that's not to say these things aren't used by family and by friends, people that know somebody that's undergone trauma. So we might try and isolate them or keep them secluded, keep them away from a certain environment. So how could somebody, be doing them a disservice by keeping somebody away from things? 8 foundations and values and principles for the trauma-informed care, the slide that we were looking at 2 minutes ago. Working in trauma-informed care is a stressful and mentally exhausting job. choose 3 different strategies you use to look after yourself and ensure you're in the best possible condition physically and mentally to support your clients. This is like, this is partly what I was meaning about the government wants us to cover certain things, but industry wants us to cover these things. It's like the government isn't necessarily desperate for you to know how you write your own self-care plan or how to put boundaries up or necessarily work to something that will keep you safe just as much as the client. But it's really, really important that you do know how to keep yourself mentally, emotionally safe and physically safe when it's needed as well. And explain why it's important to adhere to client worker boundaries in trauma-informed care and why it's important to ensure the client understands the client-worker relationship. If we don't get that over, the client, it said earlier on, to be willing to go the extra mile. So going the extra mile is when the client doesn't expect it. If the client is wanting us to go the extra mile, that's not going the extra mile. That's just been used and that's been potentially taken advantage of. So when we go the extra mile and the client is shocked and amazed that we've taken them to the service that we'd set up for them, or that we've called them on a lunchtime because we knew there was an appointment that they were going for. That would be going the extra mile because we've gone over and beyond the expected of what they were wanting. And we have to be careful not to make sure that it's like this, where they're expecting it. So we're pushed a little bit further and we're pushed a little bit further. And the client can do that. Our supervisors can do that. Our service can do that. The government can do that. And we have to make sure that we're not pushed into a mold of pushing more and pushing more and pushing more. Choose 2 ways in which boundaries can be breached by either the worker or the client from the list below. Each of the following explain the ethical legislation and/or organizational requirements that apply to your work. How would you work with an awareness of these requirements? An example of a type of breach that could occur for an individual with mental illness. Informed consent, privacy, confidentiality, very straightforward. Discrimination, human rights, work health and safety. Dignity of risk, when the client is allowed, because they're... What was that guilty charge, Marty? I missed that, sorry. With
going the extra mile as compared to being taken advantage of.
Yeah, it's hard. It's certainly not easy. Duty of care, when that's our legal responsibility, duty of care, which can be parallel with we almost feel like we're born to give duty of care, and that's what we need to do. It's mentioned that duty of care is under normal circumstances. So a person in that position would give a reasonable amount of care compared to the rest of whoever they're working with, which means that contrasts with dignity of risk, because dignity of risk is letting the client choose the risky behaviors if they want to. They're going to go back to the partner who's potentially abusive. We can't force them to leave. They're going to go back to using the substance that we know is killing them. We can't force them to come off that. If they want to leave the mental health unit when they've been advised not to, then we can't force them to stay. We can't. The law can, and the law might. But as for us, that's not for us to do. So dignity of risk, duty of care, records management, and mandatory reporting. just with mandatory reporting, make sure you know who is mandated to report in your state or territory. No, none of the assessments expect you to know the legislation about mandatory reporting of a state you're not in. But they do want you to know what your requirements are in whatever state you're working in, because there'll be a certain list of job roles in Victoria and South Australia. They're different, slightly different, of who is mandated to report. And then up in Queensland, just because you're a citizen of Queensland, you're expected to report any act of abuse, violence, because why would you not report somebody being abusive to somebody else? It's just part of living there. And Northern Territory is the same, I think. So just make sure you know your own legislation. In your own words, outline the purpose of the national practice standards for the mental health workforce. Obviously, number 4 was mentioned earlier for Indigenous national practice standards. Okay, perfect. So it's part of the resources. A range of documents and guidelines that you must adhere to in your work mental health safety. Briefly explain the purpose of each of the items listed below. Codes of practice, policy frameworks, and practice standards. If you're struggling, obviously you can Google them, or you can check the learning guide, or there's examples of all of these at First Access, and you can look at their examples and see what theirs is and how they're different. And also, when in an assessment, if the assessment wants a code of practice document or a practice standard document or a work health and safety document or a risk assessment or a self-care plan, don't try and Google them, because it won't be wanting. It's just like working in an industry where you have to pass your supervisor a risk assessment form. They don't expect you to Google it and get one off the internet. They expect you to use their policy and procedure and their form. So any template from anywhere that's expected in any assessment, use the First Access one. If it's not there, then email or LSO or something like that. Make sure you use the one that's been provided. Clients have a right to speak up for themselves and make decisions about their own recovery journey. Identify 3 different resources that you could provide to clients that would educate them on self-advocacy, empower them to make choices about their own treatment. Self-advocacy being, obviously, we've done a few modules on advocacy and self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is standing up for your own treatment, your own recovery, taking control of your own life is what the self-advocacy is, and saying, this is how I want it to work. This is where I want to go with my recovery. And then identify 3 types of referrals you may need to make for a client in trauma-informed care. There's nothing, I don't think there's anything too complicated in any of them questions, would you say?
Seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah. That's fairly normal. Now and again, there's a question that is confusing, or it could mean it seems like it's asking one thing, but it's not asking that at all. It's asking something completely different. So these questions here seem great. It's the logistics of everything else that's getting everything pulled together. So with the case studies, was Isaac the middle one? No, Isaac's the last. Oh, it's still Farida. So it's just, we've only got Belinda and Farida, building the case plan for them, looking at the care plans. Yeah, it's with each one, with the questions, you've shown that you've started to get the knowledge. With the case studies, you're working towards in a real life situation before Belinda or Farida come into the centre to come and speak to you. You've put the case plan together before they come in. You've looked at their history, and then eventually you're going to be working with them in the scenario. And then you've got Isaac as well in this one. So with 15 minutes each, and they're not, it's just one-to-one. So it's you and the client. It's not a group one, and it's not an assessor-led one. So it's not complicated. Logistically, it's not complicated. An example of the role play, looking at these, using trauma-informed care principles, obviously. And I think, isn't it the same questions for all three? Yeah. Use the principles and practices of trauma-informed care. Promote safety and trust in first access for them. Consciously use strategies that avoid re-traumatization. Respond to Belinda's past and current trauma using principles of trauma-informed care. Respond to Belinda's coping behaviors in distress using principles of trauma-informed care. Work with Belinda to identify personal resources and strengths, and recognize their coping strategies and adaptations. And build a suicide safety plan. Because that's not with them all, though, is it? No. So suicide safety plan. I'd check first access there. There was a few slides that I wanted to look at. Yeah, I'll jump back to the slides because there's a few things on suicide ideation in there. Yes, Nepal.
Okay, in role play we have got three cases. One is Belinda, second is Farida, and the third is like Isaac. So the suicide safety plan is meant for the Belinda case only, and for this Farida and Isaac we have got the trust and something like that. So we have to download the suicide safety plan from the first access, I think so, right? And we have to mention each and everything, and we need to add the video as well for this Belinda case, right? And for the next two, it's just the video thing. Am I correct?
Yes, just the other two, just the video.
Okay.
Maybe there might be. Sorry, who is it? It's Belinda. Is it? Is it Belinda?
Yeah, that's true. Belinda, yeah. So for the Belinda, there is like we need to put the safety plan, which there in the first access, yeah.
So the individual care plan is different to the safety plan. Yeah,
the last one.
Yeah.
Suicide safety plan, HST9.
Say that again.
HST9 safety plan, we need to add that for the Belinda case, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And for the rest too, there is only the video thing will come.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just because Belinda's case is different, she's
she's having suicidal ideation, so for that purpose we need to add that thing.
Yeah, she's having different problems. She's having different issues.
Yeah, true.
So I'll jump back onto the slides for a bit. don't need all of them. Yeah, we mentioned that. That's obviously, I'll linger on this because that was mentioned in the questions. Trust. So I'll just move on with these. Breaches in policies and procedures, that's when, if it's breaching legislation, obviously, then we're breaking the law. But if it's a breach in our policy and procedure, that's when we're putting our job on the line, putting our job at risk. Client consent, passing somebody's details on, obviously, and they've asked us not to, or they haven't signed the paperwork to say that we can, even when they say that we can, and then we pass it on, but we never got the paperwork done, or we've lost the paperwork, or they pass it on, or they say that we can, so we contact somebody and then they change their mind and we didn't get any paperwork done, we're in a legal problem. Privacy and confidentiality, discrimination, work health and safety. Work health and safety is physical and mental, emotional for all of us. It's not just like don't trip over the chair when you're in the room with the client. It's not re-traumatizing yourself, not having secondary trauma ourselves. It's trying to keep us safe as well as all of the people in the office. Dignity of risk, duty of care. I've got another set of slides, so I'll stop that. I've got just on this one, we've got some mentions of gender diversity, so that's helpful for some of the assessment stuff. Why won't my screen share? It's sharing the wrong one. So gender and diversity, a woman who's been sexually abused by a man will probably feel safer in a women's only service to avoid re-traumatization and offer a feeling of physical and emotional security. In some cultures, women feel safer talking with other women. For example, the Muslim culture, and men would prefer to talk to a man. They are obvious. They're almost common sense, but it's not always that hard and fast. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Aboriginal culture, obviously, with men's business and women's business, they would prefer to keep it separate. That's generally the rule. But even then, with the whole thing, if we've got cultural safety, then whether it's gender, whether it's religion, whether it's race, potentially having an immense cultural safety means that potentially anybody could speak to anybody and feel safe, potentially. Because some people's trauma, it's going to be very, very difficult to trust somebody, anyone at all, which is going to be something that they're working with. So with aged care clients, potentially if they've gone through a certain amount of trauma, with the workers, or when they were a lot younger, then it could be trying to figure out who it is that somebody's feeling threatened by, or maybe traumatized by, and not wanting to re-traumatize them by giving somebody getting them to work with a staff member that is of the similar demographic, potentially. So common beliefs about interpersonal violence. There's excuses of alcohol and drugs cause the violence. Not necessarily. Like, there could be a factor, but we're not going to blame the alcohol and drugs for somebody being abusive. While an immense amount might hold up a little bit in court, that's not the main reason. But working in a rehab and hearing the nicest people, male and female, the greatest people, male or female, do the stupidest things when they're using drugs and alcohol, that's not an excuse. It's just a reason. The person chose to stay with the abuser, or the person chose to stay where the problem was, where the danger was. So it's their fault. Minimizing the violence, it only happened a few times. Or minimizing the emotional abuse, it's not as bad as physical abuse. There's somebody I was talking to finds it hard to abuse is abuse, and it's the trauma that's felt by the person. So it doesn't matter whether it's emotional abuse, whether it's physical abuse. The person has undergone the trauma, and it's how that person is affected by the trauma. So we don't compare the trauma. Like one person was saying, it's going to be difficult for a person who's undergone severe physical trauma to then talk to another person who's only gone through emotional or mental health trauma. Like, how can they communicate? How can they work? How can they sit in the same therapy group? Because one's worse than the other. And it's not like that, because we don't choose how trauma affects us. Common beliefs can lead to shaming the victim, leading them to feel unworthy of seeking help. And when a client says, I only had it like this, so I'm sorry for taking up your time. You've probably got plenty of other people that have gone through real trauma. And I didn't want to offload my little stuff onto you. That's not. Each person has duty of care. Each person is worthy of the healthcare, human rights, whatever they've been through. We're there to support them. And again, it's exactly the same in a rehab with addiction. Or I'm better than you, or I'm healthier than you. You're just a junkie, and I never injected, so I'm better than you. All I did was drink, and you've messed your lives up on this. Or I was a dealer, and you're scum because I never touched the stuff. I just dealt it out. Or I did use a lot. I used heaps, but at least I wasn't a dealer. And there's a constant comparison all the time. And people think it makes them feel better by comparing themselves with somebody else, but it's not helping them recover. Whether the mental health, whether it's domestic family violence, I'm not as bad as them, or I'm worse than them. It's almost hiding away from the main issue. If a child, adult, elderly, or disabled person discloses abuse or neglect, recognize, respond, report. Take the person seriously, validate their concerns, gain more information, write an incident report, notify your supervisor, make a report if a child is under 16, make a plan or safety plan for an adult over 16. And like I said, with people with your state or territory, even when you move from one service to another service, you've been working with somebody, you've been working in one service, and then you move to another service, even though you know what you're meant to do, it might be put in practice slightly differently. So you might be working in one service and there's one representative for the mandatory reporting. See, you might be told, whatever it is, all you have to do is just pass them to me. Just send them to me. I'll deal with it. You can still work with them. I'll take all the details for the mandatory reporting, and I deal with every single person that we need to do mandatory reporting with. That means everything gets assessed exactly the same. Everybody gets assessed exactly the same. And I'll speak to the police and child protection, and I'll take it all off your plate and don't worry about any of it. Then you move to the next service and you've got to do it all yourself. And now you don't know what you're meant to be doing because at the last place, somebody was looking after it all for you. And the danger would be, obviously, to think, oh, somebody else is going to sort this out because this isn't part of my job. Well, it is part of your job. It would be standard practice that you're working with the client, so you deal with it. You have to know whether you're going to be talking to the police or talking to their liaison or child protection, or there's a tree diagram tool in New South Wales for finding out who you have to contact when mandatory reporting, and like the age of the client, what the issue is, and whether it's email, telephone, message straight to the right organization. Just make sure you know who you're meant to be talking to. So when trauma becomes a crisis, some people can deal with trauma for years and have it underlying, or they can have it bubbling constantly. But crisis is when somebody's overwhelmed and now I need to deal with something. I can't bear this anymore. So almost it's ready for an intervention. It's ready for help right now. So children seek connection with others for soothing, reassurance, or comfort. Trauma survivors avoid connection and find other maladaptive ways to release tension, like cutting, scratching, or burning, acting out on impulses, risky sex, all sorts. It's the risky behavior, and it might not be risky sex to be specific, but risky behavior, all sorts of risky behaviors that anybody else that knows them is really, really concerned about what they're doing because it's just risky behavior. So, like, it's not necessarily suicide, but it's feeling like speeding, feeling like that you can't control anything, so you just want to be out of control and you just want to take all the boundaries off and just do something that's just throws care to the off. Walking into a busy street, going through a dangerous area at night, things like that. Emotionally quick to argue with somebody or start an argument, or constantly defensive, ready to fight emotionally or physically. For guys, I guess, going out on a Friday or the weekend, just going out to get drunk, just to have a fight. That's the only reason. Not socializing, but going out not drunk, going out to use and have a fight, or criminal behavior, getting into addictive criminal behaviors. There's all sorts of ways that have come through. Suicidal thoughts and planning or attempted suicide. So when looking at suicide, I know we've mentioned before. Yes, homicide, definitely. We've looked at suicide before, and there's maybe 2 or 3 role plays in different areas where suicide is mentioned just briefly in the case study. And some people like to skip over it because they don't want to address it. It was only briefly mentioned in the case study, maybe once, just half a sentence about it. So I didn't mention it to the client. that's not what you want them to do. If it's mentioned at all in the case study, you have to address it. You have to talk to the client about it and say, so things like here, what is it that you were wanting to do? And when you mentioned about you felt like you wanted to end it all, in what way? What was it you were planning to do, or what was it that was triggering you to want to do that? Because in real life, we can't be scared and we can't recoil from talking about things like this. And apparently, the psychologists and the counselors that are working with this a lot will say it's typical that if somebody's serious, they've got very clear answers to all of these questions. They've got a plan. They know where, they know when, they know what with, and all they're waiting to do is the right time. Which means and I don't want to minimize it, if we're talking about it and we say, have you ever thought of taking your own life? And yeah, they don't know where, they don't know when, they don't know what with. They haven't really thought about it, but it's been it's come into their mind. Then yes, we take them seriously, but they're not in a direct threat. If that starts to develop and there's a scenario built in their head, that's when we're starting to get concerned. Yes, Marty.
The other thing that we need to be aware of, if you've got a client that that has been diagnosed with depression, or all of a sudden starts taking antidepressants, on their way out of that depression on the antidepressant, they could be so low that they don't have the energy, the capacity, the capability to be able to act on their suicidal thoughts. But once they start coming out of that state of depression, they regain the energy and the thought process and the capability to be able to actually act on it. So I've found that just because someone starts taking medication or getting help doesn't mean you forget about it. You need to actually be more aware of it, because it can actually provide them the energy levels or the capacity, the impetus or the capacity to be able to actually follow through on thought processes that they've already had.
Yeah, definitely. Nepal? Oh, yeah. Yes, with medication, there's so many things that come up that somebody might be chronically depressed, they're put onto medication because that's genuinely what the psychiatrist or the GP recommended. While it's stabilizing in their body, the depression could genuinely get worse, and until we know that they're safe, it could go from depression and finding it difficult into suicide ideation. Fairly normally, people that have committed suicide, once they got put onto medication before it stabilized in their body, and the other way around as well. When coming off medication, because of it was all fine. They went on for depression, and they were fine on the medication, and then whether that was doctor supported or whether they decided to reduce, the medication was reduced and they followed through on suicide, and they'd never even thought about it before. I know one person that they were never suicidal, so they weren't suicidal and they weren't depressed. They were put on antidepressants for nerve pain, so really, really bad back. They weren't depressed with it. So it was just physical. They were on these antidepressants and they had a drink. It wasn't much. I think they only had a couple of glasses of wine. Didn't realize it was going to mess with this antidepressant, and they were genuinely suicidal out of nowhere. Alcohol really messes with brain medication, like in a really, really nasty way. Yeah, Nepal, go on.
So in my medical practice, I have seen a few cases where a person who is on antidepressive medicine, taking like sertraline and all those. So at the time of like panic attack or like depressive episode, they used to pop up all those sedative medicines like sertraline and all that. And in this suicide safety plan, there is one question. So what all substance would you like to remove a person who is having the suicide ideation? So, I mean, the person who is having those kind of suicidal tendency, how to stop that kind of thing, not to pop up such kind of medication so that there is like no recurrence of the suicidal episode.
Are you asking, sorry, the microphone's a bit like muffled. Are you asking how to support
Yeah.
somebody who's...
Yeah, exactly. So the person is already undergoing this antidepressant therapy with the help of certain medication. But at the time of this, what do you call it, panic attack or depressive episode, he thinks it could be a better idea if I could pop all those medicine, I'll end my life, right? So how to stop that occurrence?
Accountability. We trying to help them be accountable. Trust and accountability. In the end, like if somebody we're working with actually commits suicide, then it's not something that it's not our fault. All we can do is provide them a safe space for being accountable and honest, which often, like many, many times, just the honesty where they can say, yeah, I was going to do it this morning, but I didn't. And they are so open with us that we can say to them, thanks for telling me that. Obviously, I'm not going to tell anybody about that, but are you going to be safe tonight? Because I need to make sure that you're still going to be safe today and tomorrow. And what's the plan? Which is where the safety plans come in. How are we going to make sure that you're safe over the next few days until something stabilizes? It's when something is out of the ordinary, whether it's medication, whether it's relationships, that need to be made stable again, or whatever is going to work for them. Just running through a safety plan with them, and which is a bit like a relapse prevention plan in AOD. So making sure that we're working through the safety plan with them and almost getting their word. Can I get your word that you will not do anything tonight until we get you to the mental health ward in the morning? If they say yes, then we can trust. We would normally trust that. If they say no, then it's almost like, okay, we're going to the mental health unit now. Let's go. And when they say no, they know that when they say no, they can't promise that they're going to be safe. They know that we're going to be taking them somewhere, and that's possibly why they're going to be saying that. Yes, Justin.
You kind of already said what I was going to say, but I've dealt with a few people that there's two sort of different circumstances. There's one where people are taking accountability, but sometimes like they're going to do it regardless of how much assistance you give them, assurances, all that sort of stuff. Like you've really got to separate yourself from taking any sort of responsibility in, like, if people want to do it, they're going to do it. I know this sounds kind of triggering or it can sound harsh, but like a lot of clients will lie to you if they're going to do it and they've got half an intelligent brain, that they're not going to tell you.
Yeah.
You can only go a certain amount with suicide. You can't really go, I know this sounds harsh, you can't really go the extra mile with suicide. You've just got to, like you said, like if you've got any real genuine doubt and they're willing to do it, you'd get them into the emergency department of a hospital or mental ward as quick as
Yeah.
possible. But the reality is, people in that mind frame, they're the last sort of places that they want to go, you know? So
Yeah, it's true.
and with especially suicide, it's all, it has to be from their consent. You can't really force anyone into these situations, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it can be really, it can come out of nowhere as well. Like, it is actually a really hard thing to gauge. Like, someone can seem really, like the people that has happened to me, you wouldn't have a clue. You wake up in the morning and
Yeah.
it's like, oh shit, really? I wouldn't have picked that up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that you can only do so much when you can do all what we're talking about, but you've also got to keep yourself safe because, as you said, like, you can really attach to, like, oh, I should have asked him, is he all right? I should have done this. I should have driven him to the hospital. It's going to happen if it's going to happen, you know, and you got to try and keep yourself safe as well with this sort of topic, you know,
Yeah.
because it's pretty heavy when it happens, you
It
know what I mean?
is. Yeah. So don't hide from it. Obviously, in real life or an assessment, don't hide from the topic. If somebody wants to do it, they're going to hide it and they're going to do it. And then people talk about suicide as a cry for help. The cry for help is somebody saying, "Yeah, I really wanted to, and I want to talk to you about it." And then that's the person that is wanting help and is wanting a way out. And once we talk to them about it, they can see that way out because they know that they're not alone in it. And that's what sends people off towards off to do that type of thing when they feel so alone that nobody else understands. But when they know that somebody else has spoken to them about it, when somebody else has seen them, it breaks. It can break it. Yes, Russia.
I was wondering, like, if you asked them a question and they said no, but you still suspect that they're gonna do it anyway. Can you, like, maybe make plans with them, or is it overreaching that boundary or that scope, or you're doing too much now?
What do you mean by plans?
Like, plans, like, hey, I've got this program that you can join. Not personal plans, but like a program that's, like, more professional. And so
Yeah.
there's a plan for them. Like,
Yeah, totally. Like,
yeah.
potentially a referral or something for them to hold on to. If it's too distant in the future, then it's like way out there and it's not going to be much of an incentive. But when you say plans like a group or a referral, like tomorrow morning there's something going on, can we get you into that tomorrow morning? Is that going to be, can you commit to that? And most people who say they'll commit to it do commit to it. It's very rare that somebody says, yes, I will commit to it, and then doesn't because they are overcome by the desire to end it all. When somebody's committed to something, it's almost like that person's word is going to keep them alive, which is what we try to. It's not manipulation. We're just trying to get somebody to commit and say, can I promise that you won't do anything? Can you promise to me that you won't do anything until I've spoken to whoever, I don't know, my supervisor, child protection, the police, after lunch? Can I promise that you won't do anything like at all this afternoon or tonight? Yeah. It's break time. So we'll actually, just before we go to break, did you want to there we go. So just talking about suicide ideation before break. Obviously the procedures for different clients and everybody's service, whatever service you're working with, there's probably going to be a slightly different process and protocol for working with suicide ideation. The agencies that come out and do suicide training is one of them is Assist, and I can't remember what it stands for. The horrible irony of the service that's coming out to do suicide training, they call themselves Assist because it stands for suicide informed or something training. I didn't like that, but they're really good, and they'll do training with all the staff or specific staff just to give them a good rundown. And in the end, the biggest thing that the agencies do is just get the staff to not be afraid of confronting the issue. That's pretty much what we've all said tonight. So the CAT team, crisis assessment treatment team, if somebody's tried to harm themselves or someone else, or you think they're about to, call 000. Immediately I'll go with them to an emergency department. Another option in a crisis is to contact your local CAT team at your closest major public hospital. When it says closest major public hospital, the rehab that we worked with, the hospital with the mental health unit and the detox and the ED was all probably an hour away, easy at least. So we have to be in good communication with clients if we want to take them to the hospital for any specific reason, any of them reasons, whether it's detox, mental health unit, ED, or any of the other wards. So just making sure you know where it is and who you would speak to in that ward to get a client in. Mental health triage with the unfortunate thing is that some clients, when we're talking about triage and triaging a client for the worst case scenarios, which is what triage is trying to do. It's trying to prioritize everybody into, okay, this person is the most important, needs the most immediate care, and you're next, and then somebody else comes in and takes the next spot because they are now they've just come in, but they actually needed more care than you did, and then you're going to be next. It's fine, and then somebody else comes in and they jump the queue again, and eventually you get to see somebody, and that triage list has been organized, and it's the same with mental health care. We could take somebody to a mental health unit and they, like one of the conversations that we had before the break, that somebody is honestly, seriously considering suicide, and they there's a danger that if they go home alone, then they could do something bad. So we take them to the mental health unit, and then it could be later that night, it could be the next morning, that a psychiatrist comes in and says, okay, I've assessed them, they're now not feeling that bad anymore, and we need the bed because somebody else is now serious mental health conditions, feeling suicidal. It's now been 6 hours since they said that they were feeling like that, and they've told me they're not feeling like that anymore. So can you come and pick this person up because we need their bed? And it can literally go around like that. And then 2 days later, they're feeling suicidal again. So they go back to the mental health ward, and it can be like a revolving door with clients. There isn't an emergency mental health ward. It's just a mental health ward. We've got so many beds, and if you're not seriously serious, then you need to make other arrangements. And there's been times that we know that a client has been pulling a fast one with the psychiatrist, and we've refused to pick somebody up because we know that if we go and pick them up when we only took them there this morning or yesterday, and the psychiatrist says, okay, we need the bed, come and pick them up. If we refuse, then we know that we're not the people that it's going to be palmed off onto. If there's anything goes wrong, then it's going to come back on us because we've picked them up. And it's difficult, but it's just the way that
that's what it means to be a client advocate, hasn't it, Jane? You know, you've got to act on.
Yeah.
You know, that's our advocacy role.
Yeah, and it's not nice, but it's not nice refusing to pick up a client when they were expecting you to. And the psychiatrist then saying, the psychiatrist in the mental health unit saying, well, we've got no room for them. They need to leave. You need to come and pick them up. And we say, no, we're not picking them up. We're not taking responsibility for them. And family can do this too. We're not picking them up. We're not being responsible for them. They're still your responsibility until something changes. And then the psychiatrist can get angry and say, come and pick this person up. And it really is like that sometimes. And it's a shame, but everybody's got their own focus, I guess. And nobody wants to be having something on their conscience or being responsible for something. And if the psychiatrist doesn't get your client out of the ward, the person that can't come in, that is suicidal right now, he's now got to, or she, whoever, the psychiatrist, they've still then got to figure out what to do with this other person because they've only got so many beds. And it's a horror. This emergency type of front end of mental health work is horrible. I'm glad I'm not in that at all. There's one, I know one great guy, early 20s. He has used ice for so long. He's only early 20s and he's been using a lot of ice for a long time. He's a great bloke. When he's not using ice, he's just like a diamond guy. Would do anything for you, would help anyone. And when he's on ice, he does the horrible things, most horrible things. So he's been to court a few times. Courts told him that he must take this medication that controls his mental health conditions. And he's only using ice to control his mental health conditions and get away from the horrible stuff. So the court's saying that he's got to take the medication. If he doesn't take the medication, he's going to get, yes, he's probably going to go to the mental health unit, but now that he's mandated to take the medication, so he might end up in jail. But when he's not on the medication, he's trying to get away from the stuff in his head, so he wants to take ice. So he's literally not safe on his own because he won't take medication. So in the end, he had to get the injection. The psychiatrist had to give him an injection for the medication, which made it made his desire for the ice he could stay off it. But then if he forgot to go and get his medication, he'd be straight back either ICE, jail, or mental health unit. And the psychiatrist said this is his life. His mum wanted him in the mental health unit for as long as possible. His mum loves him, but knew that he wasn't safe on his own. And there's no answer. It's horrible. What happens after a CAT assessment? The CAT will make sure you're supported during the crisis. Once the crisis has passed, the CAT then provides referrals to health and community services that can provide longer term care. That's the ideal. hopefully it does work. Good referrals, good safe places for things like that. So moving on to self-harm and risky behaviours. Obviously, there's not necessarily a link between self-harm and suicide ideation. There is no strong link there. Assess the level of risk of risky behaviour or self-harm. Get consent from the client to have a mental health assessment. With case management, depending on the urgency and needs of the client. So just because I said there's not necessarily a link between suicide and self-harm. Self-harm might not be cutting or scratching. Self-harm could be very close to suicide. They had no intention of ending it all and killing themselves. But the dangers of the risky behavior or the self-harm was very, very strong. Nobody might realize that they didn't want to kill themselves, but it was still very, very dangerous. Can result in acute hospital care, acute meaning short term. NDIS, maybe supported accommodation. If there's an NDIS, obviously support there. Psychosocial package of services. If the guy that I was on about, early 20s, he was NDIS, but you can't have 24/7 supported care. It's totally impossible. So NDIS, psychosocial package of services, yeah, you can get that, but there's no full-time unit where you can live, like in the movies, live in a mental health ward for the rest of your life. The government doesn't want that. The government wants people out of there so that the emergency people can go in. Treatment from a psychologist specializing in trauma, medication, alternative therapies. Some of this stuff is really, I'm going to give you the link just in case. Some of the stuff is really difficult. All good, Russia. I'm going to give you a couple of video links. I'm not saying that I watch them, because they are a bit too full on. There's some stuff I just can't watch. My own support, my own strength, really. So that's this one. So when we're looking at anybody potentially risky behavior, changes in behavior. To notice a change in behavior, you need to know what they were like beforehand. So it's going to be a client that you've met a few times, 2 or 3 times, or maybe a long time with that first assessment. So changes in behavior or presentation. Sometimes you've only met them once and are completely different the next time. So that can be assessed potentially. Reluctance to go home, being seemingly accident prone, excessive rocking, sucking and biting, showing wariness and distrust of adults or too trusting, difficulty sleeping, often being tired and falling asleep. This was meant for obviously the children specific, but most of these they're not exclusive to children. This is adults too. Inconsistent explanation for injuries, low self-esteem, bedwetting, soiling, aggressive or demanding behavior, difficulty relating to adults and peers, difficulty concentrating, being withdrawn or overly obedient, creating stories, poems, or artwork about abuse. And like I said, when I was talking about the videos, self-care is important, and you have to maybe do it bits at a time. There's been movies, I can watch a lot of different types of action movies. I don't like watching horror movies, but I can deal with them if somebody's got one on, or I'm watching one with somebody. There's been 2 series on Netflix that were really difficult to watch. about domestic family violence, and I've not been in that environment, but they're just too, I can't watch them. And there was one series that was on that I had to watch an episode every couple of weeks because it was just too harsh. Don't know whether it's about being a dad or knowing some people that have experienced it. I'm not sure what it was, but there's certain things that, in my own self-care, I just need to keep away from it. And it's boundaries. That's what it is. Knowing when to take a break, debriefing with the supervisor or somebody that we respect, that we can confide in, a bit like the person that we would want to be to our client in many ways. Yes, Martin.
Yeah, mate, I'm in a similar situation. I cannot watch any of those reality shows about cops or paramedics or anything like that because it just does bad things in my head. And I just know, even if someone wants to watch them, that's fine, but I just got to leave the room,
Yeah.
I just
yeah. And it's like it says here, it's knowing what your boundaries are. And it's not about that, it's not about feeling weak that I can't do that. It's about saying, I'm just to protect this up here and keep me strong, I need to not do that. That's what it is. So with self-reflection, that is part of so many different assessments, you need to be able to answer this for yourself. And this goes into a lot of assessments as well. Doing a self-care plan for yourself, or and that's not a anti-suicide plan. It's not a avoiding suicide. It's for self-care, to make sure that you're looking after your own mental health, your own emotional health. What is it going to look like as a plan laid out? Like, who do you speak to? Who are you closest to? Who can you confide in when you're not feeling, or your emotions aren't as good as you want, as strong as you want them to be? What do you do for all of the different zones of health, for holistic health? What do you do to try and bump them up? So when it's physical, emotional, mental, social, maybe spiritual, all of these different areas, what do you do to keep each one strong because we're a whole person? So we've looked at this, obviously. And that's it. The time is out at 35. So I'm going to leave the recording there. So I'll just